The boy had always been drawn to music in a way that was almost impossible to explain. From the moment he could walk, he would hum little tunes, tap on surfaces, and listen intently whenever a melody drifted from the streets or houses nearby. Music was not just something he liked. It felt like a part of him, like a secret language that only he understood. But there was one thing that he wanted more than anything else in the world, and that was to play a real piano. He had seen it countless times, standing in a grand room behind large glass doors in a house near his neighborhood. The piano was polished and shining, its black and white keys perfectly aligned. The boy had never been allowed inside that house, and every time he peeked through the window, he could feel his heart racing. He imagined running his fingers over the keys, creating the kind of music he had only ever dreamed of. But reality was harsh. The piano belonged to someone else, and touching it was a rule that could not be broken. Every day he would stand a little way from the house and watch. Sometimes he saw people play, and every note seemed to float through the air, wrapping around him, making him forget everything else. He wanted it so badly that it sometimes felt like the longing was a physical weight on his chest. He would whisper to himself, hoping that maybe, just maybe, one day he would get a chance to play. One morning, he decided he could no longer just watch. He had saved up a few coins from helping neighbors with small chores, hoping to show his seriousness and maybe even buy a small gift for the piano owner. With trembling hands, he approached the front door of the house. He felt his stomach twist into knots, but he knocked anyway, trying to sound confident despite the nervousness that made his voice shake. A kind-looking woman opened the door, smiling gently when she saw the boy. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and spoke. I really love music. I love the piano. I have always dreamed of playing it. Could you please let me try just for a little while? I promise I will be very careful. His words were sincere, filled with a mix of hope and desperation. He looked up at her, hoping she could see how much it meant to him. The woman's smile softened, but she shook her head. I'm so sorry, but the piano is very delicate. Only trained musicians can play it. It's not safe for anyone else to touch it. The boy's heart sank. He had expected some resistance, but hearing it out loud made it feel final. He tried to explain that he had been practicing on a small keyboard at home, that he understood music and could be careful, but the answer remained the same. He left the house feeling a mixture of sadness and determination. His legs carried him away almost automatically, but his mind was already spinning with ideas. If he couldn't play the real piano, he would make do with anything else. He practiced on old keyboards, on tabletops, and even on the walls of his room. He pressed his fingers on imaginary keys, imagining the music flowing from his hands. Every note he played in his imagination felt real and beautiful, and it kept his dream alive. The boy's family was poor, and they did not have much. Music lessons were a luxury they could not afford, and yet, despite everything, he never let go of his passion. His parents noticed his dedication and tried to support him in small ways. They bought him second-hand books about music, clapped whenever he performed on his small keyboard, and encouraged him to keep dreaming. Their quiet support gave him hope even on days when it seemed impossible. He would often sit outside, watching the world around him, finding rhythm in the sounds of everyday life. The clatter of carts, the chatter of neighbors, the wind rustling through trees, all became part of his growing understanding of music. He began to experiment with different ways of expressing himself. He would tap his fingers on railings, on benches, and even on the ground, listening carefully to the sounds he could make. Each day, his skills improved, though he longed for the smooth, polished keys of the real piano. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, the boy returned to the house with the piano. He stood outside the window, pressing his palms gently against the glass. He could see the reflection of himself and the piano together, and for a moment, it was as if his dream was within reach. He closed his eyes and imagined his fingers moving over the keys, creating melodies that made everyone around him stop and listen. The music he imagined was pure, full of emotion, and he felt it deep in his chest. It was the closest he had ever felt to actually playing the piano. Days turned into weeks, and the boy never stopped visiting the piano. He continued to plead politely whenever he saw an opportunity, but every time he was declined. Each rejection stung, but it also strengthened his resolve. He began to understand that dreams often required patience and persistence. Every no he received became a challenge rather than a defeat. He knew that if he continued to work hard, to practice every day, the day might come when his fingers would finally dance over those keys. In the quiet moments, when no one was around, he would close his eyes and play on his small keyboard. He would imagine a room full of people listening, their faces lighting up as the music filled the space. The imagined applause gave him courage and a sense of purpose. Music had become more than a hobby. It was his way of speaking, of expressing emotions he could not put into words. It was a language that connected him to the world, even if the world had not yet given him a chance. The boy's determination did not go unnoticed. Some neighbors would stop to watch him practice, impressed by his dedication and the little melodies he could coax from his tiny instrument. They would smile and sometimes offer gentle encouragement, telling him that his talent was rare and precious. These small gestures fueled his hope, making him believe that one day, someone would finally let him play the real piano. One morning, he woke up with a new sense of determination. He would not give up no matter how many times he was declined. Music was his heart, and he could not imagine a life without it. He gathered his courage, his small coins, and the little gift he had prepared, and walked toward the house again. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, yet light with hope. He knew that asking once more might be the moment that changed everything. When he arrived at the door, he took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened, and the same kind woman appeared, surprised to see him again. He smiled nervously, holding out the small gift as a gesture of gratitude. "I just wanted to show you how much music means to me," he said softly. "I promise I will be careful. Please, let me try to play the piano, even just for a moment." His eyes shone with sincerity, his voice trembling with emotion. The woman looked at him for a long moment, seeing the earnestness in his face and the way his hands shook slightly with nervous excitement. She sighed gently, unsure, but moved aside just enough to let him peek inside. "I'm not sure, but maybe a few notes if you promise to be very careful," she said. The boy's heart leapt with joy. Finally, a chance. Just a few notes, but it was enough to make his dream feel alive. He stepped inside, feeling the polished floor beneath his feet and the grandeur of the room around him. The piano stood before him, gleaming in the soft light, and for a moment, he could hardly believe it was real. He sat down, took a deep breath, and placed his fingers on the keys. The first note he pressed was shaky, unsure, but it made a sound that filled the room with warmth. A smile spread across his face. He was finally touching the piano he had dreamed about for so long. The journey was far from over, but this moment was his, and it was perfect. The boy's fingers trembled as they hovered over the piano keys. Even though he had imagined this moment countless times, the reality felt different. The piano was real, its polished surface shining under the soft light of the room, and it seemed to wait for him, silent but full of promise. His heart pounded with excitement, but also with fear. He did not want to make a mistake, did not want to ruin the few moments he had been given. Every muscle in his body seemed tense, yet he could not stop himself from smiling. He pressed a key gently, listening to the soft tone it produced. It was more beautiful than anything he had imagined. Encouraged, he tried a few more notes, slowly forming a small, simple melody he had practiced countless times in his head. His fingers moved awkwardly at first, unsure, but the music began to flow. It was quiet at first, almost like the piano was testing him, but soon he found a rhythm, a connection, as if he and the instrument were speaking to each other for the first time. The woman who had opened the door stood a little to the side, watching in silence. She did not interrupt him, not wanting to break the magic of the moment. The boy was fully absorbed, lost in the sound he was creating. He did not notice the way the afternoon sunlight fell on the piano, making the keys glow, or the way the shadows in the room seemed to sway with the rhythm. All that mattered was the music and the way it seemed to lift something inside him, something he had not felt before. When he finished the short melody, he looked up, almost afraid to see the reaction. The woman was smiling softly, eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "That was very beautiful," she said gently. "You have a natural gift. But remember, the piano is delicate. You must be careful." Her words, though cautious, felt like encouragement. It was the first time someone had really acknowledged his talent beyond just a polite smile or nod. His heart swelled with pride, and he knew he could not let this opportunity slip away. For the next few days, he could not stop thinking about the piano. Every moment away from it felt empty, as if something essential was missing. He continued practicing on his small keyboard at home, but it was never enough. The sound, the feel of the real keys, the way the notes resonated, it was something he could not replicate. He dreamed of the piano constantly, imagining himself playing longer and more complex melodies, imagining the joy of creating music that could move people. Despite his dedication, life outside the piano continued. He had chores to do, errands to run, and school to attend. Sometimes he felt torn between the responsibilities of daily life and his desire to be near the piano. His parents noticed his longing and tried to support him in small ways. They would ask about his practice, encourage him to keep going, and remind him that persistence was the key. Their quiet support helped him carry on, even when the world seemed to offer few chances. The boy returned to the house several times, hoping for another chance to play. Each time, he approached the door with a mix of excitement and nervousness, unsure whether he would be allowed inside. Sometimes the woman answered and smiled, acknowledging his dedication, but often she reminded him that only careful, limited access was possible. Each partial refusal stung, but he had learned not to give up. Every small opening, every moment allowed was a victory. One afternoon, the boy arrived at the house to find that the family who owned the piano was hosting visitors. He hesitated, unsure whether he should approach, but his love for music was stronger than his fear. He knocked politely, and the same woman opened the door. Seeing his determined face, she nodded and allowed him to step inside, though she warned him to be careful and not disrupt anything. The boy nodded vigorously, grateful for even a few minutes with the piano. As he approached the instrument, he noticed that it seemed different with people around. There was a tension in the room, and he felt his own nervousness rising. He took a deep breath and pressed the first key. The note sounded just as magical as before, and it eased his fear slightly. He started playing a melody, simple but full of feeling, trying to keep his focus despite the quiet chatter around him. At first, the visitors were surprised to see a boy playing, but gradually, they paused and listened, captivated by the unexpected beauty of the music. For a few minutes, the boy was in his own world. The piano became an extension of him, his emotions flowing freely through his fingers. The room seemed to fade, leaving only him and the music. Every note carried a piece of his soul, a story of longing, hope, and dedication. Even the woman who had allowed him inside seemed moved, her eyes shining as she watched him connect with the instrument in a way that was clearly more than just technical skill. When the short session ended, he reluctantly lifted his hands from the keys. The visitors clapped politely, and the woman smiled warmly at him. "You have a rare talent," she said quietly. "Keep practicing, and one day, you could achieve great things." Her words filled him with a mixture of pride and determination. He realized that every rejection he had faced, every day of longing, had led to this moment of recognition. It was a reminder that persistence, even in the face of repeated disappointment, could bring rewards. The boy left the house that day with a lightness in his step. He walked through the streets, imagining the music echoing in the rooms of his home, in the hearts of the people who had listened, and even in his own mind. He knew that his journey with the piano was only beginning, but this small victory strengthened his resolve. He would continue practicing, continue pleading politely for a chance, and continue dreaming. The piano was no longer an unreachable object. It was a goal within his grasp, a dream that he was actively bringing closer to reality. At home, he played on his small keyboard, trying to replicate the feeling of the real piano. Though the sound was different, he focused on the emotions behind each note. Every practice session became an exercise in patience and discipline, preparing him for the next opportunity with the real instrument. His parents watched quietly, proud of his dedication and impressed by the way he could pour his feelings into music, even on a simple keyboard. Night after night, he imagined himself in that grand room, the piano before him, the light falling softly on the keys. He played in his mind, shaping melodies, creating harmonies, and dreaming of the day he could perform for others without fear or hesitation. Each imagined performance strengthened his confidence, making him feel that one day, he would not only play the piano but also touch the hearts of everyone who heard him. Even though he still faced limits and restrictions, the boy's determination grew stronger. He learned to see each denial as a step in his journey rather than a barrier. Each small success, each moment of recognition, became a building block for his future. He understood that mastery of music required time, patience, and resilience, and he embraced these lessons with a seriousness beyond his years. Through it all, the boy's love for the piano never wavered. It was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a challenge, and a source of hope. The music he created, whether on a small keyboard or the real piano, was a reflection of his spirit, his dedication, and his unwavering belief that dreams, no matter how difficult, could be achieved through persistence and passion. And so, he continued to dream, to practice, and to hope, knowing that the day would come when the piano would no longer be just a distant object behind glass, but a partner in the beautiful music he was destined to create. The boy had grown more confident with each visit to the house, yet the tension inside him never disappeared. He knew that even a single wrong note could make the piano sound off, and the thought of disappointing the woman who had finally allowed him to play made his hands tremble. But he also knew that he could not let fear hold him back. Music was no longer just a dream. It was a part of his life, and he needed to express it. One afternoon, the house seemed unusually quiet. The woman who had always been careful to supervise him was occupied elsewhere, attending to chores in another room. The boy stood near the piano, uncertain at first, knowing he was not fully alone but sensing a small, rare opportunity to explore the instrument more freely. He took a deep breath and sat down, letting his fingers hover above the keys. The polished surface gleamed under the soft sunlight that filtered through the windows, inviting him to play. He pressed the first note gently, testing the sound. It rang clearly, almost as if welcoming him. Encouraged, he began a melody he had practiced countless times in his mind. The notes were soft at first, hesitant, but then they started to flow more naturally. His fingers moved with a growing confidence, and he found himself improvising slightly, adding small flourishes that surprised even him. The music was no longer just repetition. It had emotion, rhythm, and life. Suddenly, the boy noticed that the woman had quietly returned to the room. She stood behind him, watching closely. Her eyes were wide, not with disapproval but with amazement. She had seen him play before, but this time, something was different. The boy's touch on the keys seemed lighter, more assured, and the music had a warmth and depth she had never heard from anyone else, especially a child of his age. The boy was unaware of her presence for a moment, lost in the music. Every note carried his excitement, his longing, and the countless hours he had spent practicing in secret. He could feel the music rising, swirling around him, and he began to play faster, more boldly, letting his instincts guide his fingers. It was as if the piano had become a part of him, responding to his thoughts and emotions directly, creating sounds that were richer and more vibrant than he had ever imagined. The woman stepped closer, unable to hide her awe. She had expected a careful, modest display of talent, but what she witnessed was extraordinary. The boy was not just playing. He was commanding the piano with a natural skill that seemed to emerge from deep within him. She noticed the subtle expressions on his face, the way his eyes sparkled, and the slight smile that curved his lips. Every movement was a testament to his connection with the instrument. He continued, unaware of how much time had passed. The music filled the room, flowing effortlessly and creating an atmosphere of wonder. Even the birds outside seemed to pause and listen. The boy's emotions poured into each note, and with each one, he felt lighter, freer, as though a weight he had carried for years had finally begun to lift. He was no longer just a boy longing to play a piano. He was a young musician expressing his soul. When the melody reached its peak, the boy paused, letting the final notes linger in the air. He opened his eyes and realized the room was silent except for the faint hum of the piano's vibrations. The woman's eyes glistened as she clapped softly, trying not to startle him. "I have never heard anything like that," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and delight. "You have a gift that is rare and precious. Your fingers, they bring the music to life in a way that is truly remarkable." The boy felt a surge of pride and humility at the same time. Pride because his talent had finally been recognized. Humility because he knew he had so much to learn. He had spent so long dreaming, practicing, and hoping, and now, for the first time, someone had witnessed the full depth of his ability. The woman's words were not just encouragement. They were an acknowledgement of his hard work, his passion, and the heart he had poured into music. From that day, things began to change. The woman allowed him longer sessions with the piano, observing quietly but trusting him to explore and create. Each time he played, he discovered something new. A chord he had never tried, a melody that came from his imagination, a rhythm that made the music feel alive. The boy's confidence grew, and with it, his connection to the piano deepened. He began to understand that music was not just about notes on a page. It was about expression, emotion, and communication. The boy also started to notice changes in himself. He became more patient, more focused, and more aware of the beauty in small details. He learned to listen not just to the piano but to the world around him. Every sound, every conversation, every moment became a potential source of inspiration. Music was no longer a dream. It was a way of seeing life, understanding it, and sharing it with others. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, the boy played a melody that felt different from anything he had tried before. It was gentle, almost like a story unfolding in sound. He imagined a listener somewhere far away, feeling the music, understanding the emotions behind each note. The melody carried a mix of hope, longing, joy, and a hint of sadness, capturing everything he had experienced on his journey so far. When the last note faded, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that he had expressed something truly meaningful. The woman, as always, was there to witness it. She did not speak immediately, letting the silence of the room honor the moment. Then she said softly, "Your music is not just skill, it is magic. Touches people in ways words cannot. You must continue. You must let this talent grow." The boy nodded, feeling a deep sense of responsibility. He knew she was right. Talent alone was not enough. It required dedication, discipline, and the willingness to keep learning and improving. Encouraged, the boy began to experiment even more. He tried different tempos, dynamics, and styles, allowing his imagination to guide him. Sometimes the music was playful, sometimes somber, and sometimes it seemed to tell stories without words. He discovered that the piano could be a mirror to his emotions, a companion to his thoughts, and a bridge to others' hearts. Each session became a journey, and each note a step further into the world of music he loved so deeply. Outside the house, people began to notice changes too. Neighbors who had once seen him practicing on small keyboards now observed him with curiosity and admiration. They could sense that something special was happening, even if they could not hear the exact notes. The boy's dedication, his visible passion, and the quiet transformation in his demeanor inspired them. Some even began offering words of encouragement, gifts of small music books, or simply kind smiles that lifted his spirits. The boy's connection with the piano continued to strengthen. Every day, he approached it with a mixture of respect and excitement, knowing that each touch of the keys was an opportunity to explore, learn, and express himself. He began to dream bigger, imagining not only private practice but the possibility of performing for an audience, sharing the beauty of music with people beyond the walls of the house. The idea of touching hearts with his melodies became a new motivation, one that pushed him to improve, innovate, and persevere. By the end of this period, the boy had transformed in ways that went beyond music. He had gained patience, resilience, and a deeper understanding of his own abilities. The piano had become a teacher, a friend, and a source of endless inspiration. He had learned that talent alone was not enough, and that perseverance, courage, and passion were equally important. And he knew that his journey was only beginning, that even greater experiences, challenges, and triumphs lay ahead. The boy's story with the piano had reached a turning point, a moment where his gift was recognized, and the path to pure wonder and musical expression was opening wide before him. The boy had been playing the piano for some time now, and his confidence had grown remarkably. Every note he played seemed to resonate not only in the room but deep inside him. He had reached a point where the music felt alive, as if the piano itself responded to his emotions and desires. Each session became more than just practice. It was an experience, a conversation between him and the instrument, a way of expressing feelings he could never put into words. One afternoon, the woman who had allowed him to play invited a few guests into the house. She did not announce that the boy would play, but she trusted that his presence near the piano would eventually lead to something special. The boy, nervous at first, felt a wave of excitement. There were people in the room he did not know, and the thought of playing in front of them was intimidating. Yet something inside him urged him forward. He approached the piano with a steady resolve, remembering the countless hours he had spent practicing and imagining this very moment. He placed his fingers on the keys, and the first notes were soft, hesitant, almost shy. But as he continued, the music began to flow freely, gaining strength and beauty with each passing moment. His fingers moved naturally, as if they had been born to touch the keys. The melody he played was not something he had practiced before. It was spontaneous, emerging from deep within him. Each note carried emotion, capturing joy, longing, and a sense of wonder all at once. The guests fell silent. Some leaned forward slightly, unsure whether to interrupt the moment, while others simply closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The boy was unaware of their reactions. He was entirely focused on the sound, feeling it resonate through his body and into the room. The piano seemed to vibrate with life, responding to the subtle shifts in his hands and the emotions that poured through him. It was a magical connection, one that left the listeners spellbound. As he played, he noticed that even the simplest combinations of keys produced extraordinary results. A chord here, a gentle touch there, and suddenly the music seemed to fill every corner of the house. He experimented freely, not caring whether the notes followed any strict pattern or rule. He had learned that true music came from feeling, not from instruction. Each time he struck a key, it felt as if he was telling a story, speaking in a language that everyone could understand, even without words. The woman watched quietly from the side, a smile on her face. She could see that the boy had gone beyond talent. He had entered the realm of artistry. There was a depth to his playing that touched the soul, a purity that made the room almost sacred. The guests, too, were captivated. Some had never heard anything like it, and a few exchanged glances, wondering how such a young boy could create music that was so powerful, so moving, and so full of life. As the melody progressed, the boy's confidence soared. He began to play faster, yet every note was precise, every rhythm deliberate. His improvisation felt natural, as if guided by some unseen force. The music shifted seamlessly between gentle, flowing passages and more vibrant, energetic ones, capturing the full range of emotion in a single performance. The room was filled with a sense of awe, as if the music itself had transported everyone to a different world. At one point, a delicate chord rang out, soft but resonant, and the boy held it, letting it linger in the air. The silence that followed was almost as powerful as the sound itself. Everyone in the room felt it, the pause, the weight of the music, the emotion that remained suspended for a moment before fading slowly. It was a testament to the boy's understanding, his intuition, and his ability to communicate something deeper than words. The performance continued, each note a reflection of his journey. The long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, the quiet hope, and the overwhelming passion for music. He felt free, as if nothing in the world mattered except for the connection between his fingers and the piano keys. The room seemed to disappear, leaving only the music, the piano, and the boy's expression of pure emotion. When the last note finally faded, there was a moment of silence. It was not awkward or uncomfortable. It was reverent, filled with the realization that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Then the guests began to clap, softly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Some were moved to tears, others simply stood in awe, unable to find words. The boy's heart raced, not with pride, but with a sense of fulfillment. He had shared something intimate, something beautiful, and it had touched others in a way that left them speechless. The woman who had guided him smiled warmly. "You have created something special today," she said. "Your music is not just notes and keys. It is a reflection of your heart, your soul. Keep playing, keep exploring, and never lose the connection you have found with the piano." Her words were gentle, yet filled with conviction. She knew that this boy had a rare gift, one that went beyond technique and talent. It was a gift of expression, empathy, and creativity, and it had the power to inspire others. The boy, overwhelmed by the experience, took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He realized that music had become more than a dream or a passion. It was a responsibility. The music he created could move people, evoke emotions, and tell stories that words could not. He understood that he had been given an opportunity not just to play, but to share a part of himself with the world. After the guests had left, the boy sat alone for a moment, letting the room settle and reflecting on what had just happened. He felt a sense of peace, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing he had done something meaningful. The piano, now silent, seemed to hum gently as if acknowledging his effort, his expression, and the connection they shared. He realized that this was only the beginning. There were countless melodies still waiting to be discovered, countless emotions still to be expressed. Over the next few weeks, the boy's sessions with the piano became even more immersive. He experimented with different styles, explored new techniques, and allowed himself to improvise freely. Each time he played, he felt a deeper connection to the instrument and to himself. The music became a part of his identity, a language through which he could communicate, express, and even heal. Word of his talent began to spread quietly among the neighbors and the few who had witnessed his playing. People started to look forward to seeing him at the piano, curious to hear the magic he could create. Some offered encouragement, while others simply watched silently, appreciating the gift unfolding before them. The boy, however, remained humble. He understood that the magic was not in showing off but in the joy of creating, in the purity of expression, and in the ability to touch hearts without needing words. One evening, as the sun set and the room was bathed in golden light, the boy played a melody that felt particularly special. It was gentle, flowing, and full of emotion, capturing the essence of his journey. The struggles, the hope, the patience, and the unwavering love for music. As the last note lingered in the air, he realized that the piano had become more than an instrument. It was a friend, a companion, and a teacher. It had witnessed his dreams, his dedication, and now his triumph. The woman, who had always been there to guide and observe, approached him quietly. "You have touched something today that goes beyond music," she said softly. "You have created pure wonder. Remember this feeling, and let it inspire you to keep playing, to keep dreaming, and to share your gift with the world." The boy nodded, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. He knew that the piano had opened a door not just to music, but to a future filled with possibility, wonder, and endless opportunity. The boy had grown in ways he could never have imagined. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a bridge between his dreams and reality. Each time he touched the keys, he felt a sense of fulfillment that no words could describe. The room, the piano, and the people who sometimes watched had all become part of his journey, and he was ready to take the next steps toward realizing his full potential. One afternoon, the woman who had always guided him appeared with a gentle smile. She told him that she had arranged a small gathering for him to play in front of a larger audience. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was more than he had ever imagined, but he trusted the woman and knew that his preparation had brought him to this moment. He took a deep breath and walked into the room, feeling the polished floor beneath his feet and seeing the piano waiting for him like an old friend. The audience was small but attentive. Friends, neighbors, and a few music enthusiasts had gathered quietly, waiting to hear the boy play. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, and the boy felt the weight of their expectation. He sat at the piano, placed his fingers gently on the keys, and closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, letting the familiar sensation of the piano beneath his hands calm his nerves. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft and tentative, as they had always been at the beginning of a new piece. But soon the music flowed with confidence and clarity. The boy's fingers moved over the keys with ease, weaving a melody that was both simple and profound. Every note carried emotion, telling a story that words could not express. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward, some closed their eyes, and some simply sat in silence, letting the music wash over them. Each person in the room felt a connection to the boy's journey, his struggles, his hope, and his passion. As the performance continued, the boy experimented with new ideas, adding gentle flourishes, unexpected pauses, and subtle variations that made the music even more expressive. It was no longer just a song. It was a story unfolding in sound. He played with feeling, letting each note reflect his experiences and emotions. The piano seemed to respond to him, resonating with his touch and amplifying the beauty of the melodies he created. The audience was mesmerized. They could see the boy's dedication, his love for music, and the depth of his talent. Every movement of his hands, every expression on his face, told a story of determination and passion. The applause that followed each piece was not just for the music. It was for the heart and soul he put into every performance. The boy felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not from the recognition, but from the knowledge that he had shared something truly meaningful with others. After the performance, the woman approached him with a proud smile. "You have a rare gift," she said softly. "Your music touches hearts and inspires people. Keep playing, keep learning, and never lose the connection you have with the piano." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. He realized that his journey was only beginning, and that there was so much more to explore, learn, and express. Over the following weeks, the boy's confidence continued to grow. He practiced diligently, experimenting with new styles and compositions. The piano became an extension of himself, a way to communicate emotions, dreams, and stories that could not be expressed through words alone. He discovered that music had the power to bring people together, to heal, and to inspire. The boy understood that his talent was not just for himself, but for anyone who could hear and feel the music he created. Word of the boy's extraordinary talent began to spread beyond the house. Neighbors shared stories of his performances, and soon, a few local musicians and teachers came to witness his skill firsthand. They were impressed by the depth of his understanding, the fluidity of his technique, and the emotion that infused every note. Some offered to mentor him, provide lessons, or even help him perform in larger venues. The boy was grateful, but he remained humble, remembering the long journey that had brought him to this point. One day, a local music school invited him to perform in a small recital. The boy was nervous but excited. This was his first opportunity to play for an audience outside the familiar walls of the house. He prepared carefully, choosing pieces that showcased both his technical skill and emotional depth. When the day arrived, he stepped onto the stage, feeling the weight of expectation but also the thrill of opportunity. As his fingers touched the keys, the world around him seemed to fade, leaving only the music, the piano, and the story he wanted to tell. The performance was a success. The audience was moved, and many were impressed by the boy's talent at such a young age. He received words of encouragement, invitations to perform again, and offers to learn from experienced teachers. The boy felt a sense of validation, not in terms of fame or recognition, but in knowing that his passion and hard work were being acknowledged. Music had given him a voice, and now people were listening. Back at home, the boy continued to practice and compose new melodies. Each day brought new challenges, new ideas, and new opportunities to grow. He experimented with different genres, explored improvisation, and even began to write his own compositions. The piano had become a constant companion, a source of comfort, inspiration, and joy. Through it, he could express his thoughts and feelings, share his dreams, and touch the hearts of others. The boy's journey also taught him important life lessons. He learned patience, perseverance, and the value of hard work. He understood that dreams do not come easily, and that dedication and persistence were necessary to achieve them. He also learned humility, realizing that talent alone was not enough. It required discipline, responsibility, and a willingness to keep learning. Most importantly, he discovered the joy of sharing his gift with others and the power of music to create wonder and connection. As time passed, the boy's reputation grew, and opportunities for him expanded. He was invited to perform in larger venues, participate in competitions, and even collaborate with other musicians. Each experience strengthened his skills, broadened his perspective, and deepened his love for music. Yet, he never forgot the early days, the longing, the refusals, the small moments of joy when he first touched the piano. Those experiences remained close to his heart, shaping the musician he was becoming. Looking back, the boy realized that every challenge, every moment of doubt, and every rejection had been a step toward this moment of recognition and fulfillment. The piano had not only been a dream realized, but a teacher, a guide, and a source of endless inspiration. It had shown him the power of persistence, the importance of passion, and the beauty of expressing oneself through music. In the end, the boy's story became one of hope, determination, and the transformative power of music. He had begged to touch the piano, been declined, and yet, through patience, dedication, and unwavering love for music, he had created something extraordinary. His fingers had brought melodies to life, touched the hearts of those who listened, and turned a simple dream into a journey of wonder and fulfillment. The piano had not only given him a voice, but had also shown him the endless possibilities that come from following one's passion with courage and persistence.